And see the planes coming over to bomb Coventry. We used to stand there and count them. They were the German planes, and we used to stand and watch them about something like 8 to 5:30, and then we'd go in and go to bed. And I used to feel quite bad about it. And my father used to say, no, it's just history. But it was so bad because you knew that Coventry was going to be absolutely flattened. They weren't low, they were droning over, but it was a huge amount. Now, this would be what, 40, 41?
Yeah.
I think Coventry got it in the neck then. I'm not too good on history, but I can't honestly remember the war holding us back, apart from being short of petrol. You know, I can't take you here, I can't take you there because we're short of petrol. But apart from that, food didn't bother us. My two sisters worked in Cumberland's in Stamford. So we used to get chocolate biscuits, all that sort of thing, because if you work in that, you take them home, don't you? So I never really noticed a shortage. We never had much rationing because we had chickens, and my father used to fatten pigs. I think we passed it. The only time we were absolutely terrified was I used to have a music lesson once a week with a Miss Sharp from King's Cliff. I was sitting there learning my piece and she was sitting at the side of me, and suddenly there was this terrific noise, and it was a doodle bug came over our house and landed, I think it landed somewhere like Water-Newton or somewhere like that, between sort of Water-Newton and Castor, but it was coming down, and that's the only sound we ever heard, anything sort of frightening. My sisters had boyfriends in the forces, and one thing I can remember, and afterwards we used to talk about it as we'd sort of grown up and got our families. Both my sisters, one's 5 or 6 years older than me and the other one's 7 years older than me. They had boyfriends stationed at that Yarwell camp in the army, and they used to come to the house and they used to go dancing, and we got the message that we were to be outside the school at 5 o'clock that afternoon. And we thought, oh great, you know. So there was my two sisters and myself, 2 or 3 other girls who got boyfriends there, and the fence goes round and then you come down the middle one. I'm sure that fence must still be there. We sat on the fence waiting and waiting, and at 5 o'clock dead, all these army lorries came by, and there wasn't a sign of a soldier anywhere. The one driving had sort of curtains either side of him. He could just see ahead. And there might have been somebody in the seat, but the windows had blinds on them. And we couldn't believe it. But it was the whole camp left, 1944. The whole camp just evacuated. And when I was at university, I had a fiancé at university, and he lived at Purbook, near Portsmouth. And we were talking about it one day. He was staying with me in Wansford, and I was saying, oh, that's where the army camp was. And he said, you know, I was saying about how sad it was. It evacuated like that. There wasn't anything left. They just cleared out. And he said they all parked round where he lived, just north of Portsmouth. Because the next morning was D-Day.
Yes.
They all went.
Yes.
But, I mean, they were soldiers that had all come back from Africa. And they'd all been through Africa and Italy, and then came up there, and then they all went on D-Day. But one didn't come back. One sister's boyfriend didn't come back. But the other one did, and they married, and they lived in Wansford in Dean Close. Mm-hmm. But I often think of that because we just couldn't believe it. You know, we said, there must have been 100 lorries, but there were a lot, because it was a whole camp cleared out. And within, I think, months, that camp was full of, not refugees, I don't know what you call them, like people, English people, whose husband had come back from the war. They'd nowhere to live, and that camp was full, absolutely full, because I used to do the post round there, and go all around those Nissen huts. I suppose they've all gone now,
Yeah,
have they?
they've gone, yes.
Yeah. Because I couldn't believe it. They were living in those Nissen huts with just one stove at the end. I can remember the Lerner boys, Arthur and Terence Lerner. Arthur was younger than me and Terry was the same age as me, and he was really miffed when I went to Fletton School, because it meant, we wouldn't sort of meet up or walk to school together again. I can remember Doris Royth and her brother. Doris used to go on the bus with me to school, and she went to the Cathedral Gateway School learning shorthand typing. This would be about 43, 44. What she'd learnt in the day, she used to show me, and I used to learn it on the bus home. I don't know what happened to her. She obviously went back to London. I suppose it was 45. Mm-hmm. But her mother came. There were quite a few girls had mothers with them. And I know that somebody told us they were Jewish, but we weren't ever to mention it. And it didn't register with me because I'd never really heard of a Jewish religion. You hadn't heard it. And there was another family called Darling, I think. Yes. Shirley Darling, yes, her mother.
Yes.
Mrs. Darling was very self-important. They must have lived near us, I think. But I can't remember. I can remember Gerald Straw, the teacher.
Oh, the teacher who came from London with the evacuees.
Yes,
yeah.
He came with the evacuees, and he helped my year get our scholarship to go to Fletton. Mm. That would be 41.
Mm-hmm. So he taught you some of
yes, that's why I missed out on Miss Smith.
Yeah.
I survived Mary Smith, and when I should have gone into the next class, you came in the big door, and then halfway across there was like a wooden framework with a green curtain on, and the stove was sort of in the middle there. And that was Mr. Stafford's class, and that was Lillian Smith's class, and then Mary Smith was in the little room. In a little room. He came and he took over part of Lillian Smith's class, I suppose. Right. And he worked really hard. He was so good. He was so gifted. And he got me and Anne Rackham and Gerald Tebbett. He got the three of us through the scholarship. But nobody had got a scholarship for years. Both my sisters were very smart, but they were never put in for. Mm. But he entered the three of us and we got it. But he really, I can't honestly remember his lessons that much, but he must have been a very gifted teacher to have got three of us through. I can remember the playground games and this sort of thing, Whip and Top. Yes. And What's the Time, Mr. Wolf and all that. I remember all those games we used to play. I remember the Tribe. John Tribe stayed a long time.
Mm. With Mr. Howard, there was a Mr. Howard there who was the area warden, and we believe that he took in Kenneth Tribe and John Tribe.
We knew the Tribes because John Tribe was quite a character, but I don't think they lived in our road. I mean, there was Frank Howard and Louis Howard, and they had 2 children, and next door to us was Jack Howard and his wife. They had 5 children. We had one. She came about 1942. They brought some more children out, and those who'd had them wouldn't take any more, wouldn't have them. Mm. My mother agreed we'd have one, but I mean there were 5 of us in our house, so we had to have a put-you-up bed. Sort of, she and I swapped between it. But I think she only stayed about 3 or 4 months. Vera Brown. Her parents came to see her. By the time they got to us, somebody brought them up in a van because they were lying on the road down by the paper mills. They'd over-imbibed. And so they lay on our grass till about 6 o'clock. And then my father got his car out and took them back to the bus because they'd sobered up by then. And I remember Vera was very upset. And then her mother turned up one Saturday by the same route. I suppose they came by train and then bus, and she'd walked up from the village. We didn't know she was coming. And she took her home. And I said, would she write and tell me, because she'd got quite a few brothers and sisters. But I never heard from her. But there were a lot of terrible things happened in London. And they used to all go down in the tubes.
Yes.
and there 1 or 2 tubes got flooded, and her family in Balham, I think it was Balham, they all got wiped out in a horror. But you don't hear of those horror stories. They were all just kept.
No.
There were hundreds of people in those shelters. You know, they went down the tube because there was nowhere else to go. And if they got blocked in there or bombed in there, and this was a big flood, that was sort of well towards the end of the war when I found out that. And I thought how absolutely dreadful. She stayed with us, you know, because I think she got 2 little brothers and some older brothers and sisters.
Yes.
So it must have been odd having all these, well, there weren't that many, you say, but you know, having these strange children from London appearing in the village community and joining you at school. We heard that Mr. Straw had arranged an entertainment.
Well, I know that there was a big party a Christmas party organised, and this would be about 1940, because my eldest sister didn't want to go. She was still at school. She'd be about 13 or 14. I wanted to go, but my middle sister wasn't keen. I went and wasn't allowed in because I hadn't taken any cakes. But I didn't even know I was supposed to take any cakes. And anyway, we never had cakes in the house. My mother never baked. We always had dogs. Had a dog each as kids. When we used to come out of our house, you can imagine where we were, you know, we were the second one of the old ones.
Yeah.
And go down the lane, round the corner, and then go down Sutton Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And I can actually, because we did that, and I did that all my life, I can remember every little item along the road. My sister, when she left school, my sister Vera, the second one, she got a job as a maid at Stibbington Manor. The Lockyers lived there then, Mr. and Mrs. Lockyer. They had no family. I used to go and see her sometimes because she used to get a bit bored after she'd done the evening meal. She was the maid and the cook and what have you. And I used to go and dry up and sit with her. And in the summertime I used to have a bit of a wander around the garden because there's a big walled garden there. Is it still there? The big walled garden. Really loved it in that garden because they had a gardener, I can't remember his name, but he kept it immaculate. And one day we were walking past and there were these lovely, lovely flowers. And I said to my sister, I'm going to pick one of these. She said, don't, for God's sake. And a deep voice said, no. And it was Mr. Lockyer. I'd never seen her boss before. He was a solicitor in Peterborough. I'd never seen him before. And he said, let me tell you about those flowers. He said, this is the very first time I've grown them, and I don't think anybody else will have grown them. He said, they're Russell lupins. But Russell lupins are all colours, and it was a huge bed of them. And he said, he turned to me, he said, what are you doing tonight? And I sort of said, well, we're going home for my tea now, sort of thing. He said, come round tonight. He said, I need you, I've got a job for you. And it was ball boy, because as you went through that gate and those flowers were there, he got a big grass tennis court there. And he taught me to play tennis. I was about 8. He would tell my sister, tell her to come round Saturday morning, because actually it meant he got somebody to practice with, didn't it? He got this little mug that would run all over the place and pick up balls when he had a game, or they'd have an evening tennis party. It never bothered me that I wasn't ever included in that, but I used to get tennis practice every...
Not the same one was there before.
And we had toilets behind, which were absolutely incredible. You went down steps to the toilet, but we went home for lunch, so we really never used the toilet. You just hold it till you got home. It was terrible.
Idea.
But everything was so cold. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
Everywhere was so cold. Such a cold place. But
where the toilets were, we've had converted into toilets, acceptable standard toilets.
because I think where we had the school gardens, you built on all that, haven't you?
Yes, at the back of the main school building, we've got a wildlife garden, and then behind that there's our residential block.
Yeah, because I know we used to... My father had a haulage business. He started off emptying people's toilets. He was a night soil collector, which Because you see, no, there was nothing like flush toilets.
Mm.
Nothing like that.